Hi, I'm Brian from Codependency No More, and you probably hear from me weekly about the interviews that I do with codependents and codependency experts. I've been learning some of the biggest keys to avoid guilt, shame, manipulation, and start having healthier, happier relationships with the people you care about. I want to share with you some of the biggest keys that I've learned in the hopes that you can get back on the right track and shortcut your way to less anxiety and more fulfillment. But why would you want to listen or care what I have to say? Well, I'm going to give you the quick version of my story, and who knows, parts of it might even sound something like yours. My sister and I were born into a seemingly healthy family. Although my parents were loving, there was a history of addiction in our family, and codependent traits were passed down the generations. It showed up very differently in each of our lives, but it changed our trajectory forever. I had traumatic experiences with anxiety and panic attacks as a child, which affected my beliefs about the way that others perceive me and led to perfectionistic and codependent tendencies both socially and professionally. Jennifer had much more classical codependency issues. At the age of 19, she started dating a man who abused her emotionally and physically. She went from having a job, a car, and a mobile phone to having none of those within 6 months. She covered up for his problems, she stole for him, she did drugs with him. She was manipulated and brainwashed to believe that her family was all bad and her narcissistic boyfriend was her only redeeming quality. This lasted until she finally got the courage to break away for good. She spent months immersed in recovery activities, including inpatient and outpatient rehab, CBT and DBT therapy, AA, Al-Anon and CODA meetings, women's shelters, even some time in a hospital for PTSD. During this time, counselors realized that her problem wasn't with substances, it was actually behavioral. And that's when we heard the word codependency for the first time. We learned that codependents have a disassociation with self, causing shame and emptiness. And that's why codependents tend to distract themselves with an external focus. In a later video, I'm going to share with you one of the most important skills codependents need to start closing this gap, a foundational building block to healing. In this video, I want to tackle a question that I've gotten from several people. People want to know, am I codependent, and why am I codependent? Naturally, when we can sort this out and put the pieces together for ourselves, we can put a name to our problem, and it becomes tangible, something with a definite cause. And therefore, it inspires us to move towards a solution that we can be confident in. And so, surprisingly, there's no universally agreed upon clinical definition for codependency, so I'm going to give you the best one that I've heard. First, see if these 4 statements resonate with you. Codependency is hanging your self-esteem in the ability to control yourself and others in the face of adverse consequences. Codependency is assuming the responsibility to meet someone else's needs to the exclusion of your own. Codependency is anxiety and boundary distortions around intimacy and separation. Codependency is an enmeshment in relationships with impulse-disordered individuals. If those 4 statements largely resonated with you, see if you also identify with at least 3 items on the following list. Excessive reliance on denial, constriction of emotions with or without dramatic outbursts, depression, hypervigilance, compulsions, anxiety, substance abuse, stress-related medical illness, being the victim of recurrent physical or sexual abuse, remaining in a primary relationship with an active substance abuser for at least 2 years without seeking outside help. If you identify with at least 3 of those items and the first 4 statements resonated with you, and you're watching this video, then you're likely suffering from codependency. When people realize this, the next question is naturally, why am I like this and how can I get better? Well, there's a lot that can be said about this. We're all interdependent on each other as human beings. We're social creatures who don't survive well in isolation. However, our level of dependency is on a sliding scale. For example, on one hand, you have beneficial interdependence, and this is where I help you a little bit, you help me a little bit. We have a healthy beneficial relationship. Then you have problematic interdependence. In this relationship, there's a little bit more friction and stress involved. But then you have compulsive, neurotic, habitual codependent behavior, and this type of behavior can materialize for a lot of reasons. They could involve an invalidating upbringing, a traumatic experience, or all sorts of inner child issues. And codependency gets compounded by triggers and compulsions, rationalizing, denial, or minimizing, and it shows up in all sorts of ways, from being controlling or people-pleasing and then becoming passive-aggressive when you don't feel it's been reciprocated. But the root cause of this can usually be tied back to shame and a separation of self. You see, chronic Internalized shame makes us feel unworthy, inferior, inadequate. And instead of trying to become our true self, the person we actually are authentically, we try and actualize our ideal self, the person we think we're supposed to be. A codependent is someone who can't function from his or her true self, and so they organize their thinking around another person, someone they see as needing their help. And so the focus is external, and codependency is an issue of lost self. Now, as confusing and defeating as codependency can be, understanding the cause naturally leads us to a solution. You can change and transform for the better. I have, my sister Jennifer has, and I talk to people regularly who are currently overcoming their issues and having healthier, happier lives. You just need to have the right tools in your arsenal. We show people how to do the same thing. In fact, in my next video, I'm going to show you one of the most foundational skills that codependents need to start getting better and how to start practicing it. In the meantime, I'd love to hear from you. Use the comments section below this video to tell me what you'd like to know about getting better from codependency. What's your biggest struggle? What are you hung up on right now? I'm Brian Pizer from Codependency No More, and I'll see you in a couple days.